Good afternoon and welcome to CAD-1 and BD Mackey's Consulting's joint webinar, Interference Checking in Revit. My name is Stan Henne, CAD-1 Business Development Manager, and I have with me today, as always on these webinars, Brian Mackey, founder of BD Mackey Consulting, one of the top Revit firms in the country nowadays. So Brian, welcome, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Stan.
Guess we'll probably have the housekeeping slide up here. Most of you have been on a go-to before, so you know the rules and regs, and hopefully you can hear us and you're either on your telephone or on your mic and speakers. If you want to move the console out of the way so that you can see the entire screen, hit the little orange and white arrow, and why don't everybody hit the raise your hand button if you can hear us to make sure that we're coming through okay to you. So if you could hit the raise your hand button, looks like several of you are hitting it, so we're good there. Most importantly, if you would like to ask questions, please type them into the question box, and we will answer them as close to in context as we can. And want to just let everybody know that we always enjoy doing Revit Radio right before one of these webinars, but this one is topic specific, so you know, try and help us keep your questions on this particular topic as much as possible. And with that, Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I'd just like to reiterate what Stan said on questions. Just please ask the questions as they come up. I don't wait till the end, because if you're asking a question and I've got to go back 50 minutes later to try to answer it, I'm probably going to forget what I was even talking about to start with. So
Brian has very ADD-ish in that regard. Very smart man, but didn't remember 2 seconds ago.
So going to talk about interference checking in Revit. It's one of those utilities in Revit that, you know, by no means is it the Navisworks clash detection. It's partially why I believe Autodesk called it the interference checking. But it can be a very powerful tool. I think it's a little bit underutilized for a lot of firms inside of there. So there's just a few things to be understood about the interference check. Is you can use it on your own file. So if you've just got a file, nothing linked in from any other discipline, you could use it to run interference checks on your own stuff. So maybe you do residential and you model structural as well as the architectural, and you can definitely use it for that. The one downside of the interference check, well, one of the downsides, I guess I should say, is, you know, you can only check the entire category. And I put a little asterisk on that one because when you start looking at that, like, I can check all windows to all something else, but I can't say windows on the first floor, windows on the second floor, etc. The nuance to that is there are some categories like structural framing that will allow you to check only girders or only joists, etc. So you can check it between those different categories. Now, the nice part about that is one of those categories can come from a linked file. So if I have a file that's got MEP linked in and structure linked in, I'm going to be able to check my ceilings to the ductwork, or probably not, yeah, the ductwork, but not the diffusers. I'm going to be able to check, you know, my windows to the structural columns, my doors to structural columns, etc. So I can go through linked files, etc. Downside, one of those files has to be the file you're currently in. So I'm not going to be able to link in structure, link in MEP, and then run an interference check between ductwork and beams, because it has to be native in my file. Now, with that said, you can easily go open up the MEP file and then make sure the link to the structure file is established and then run it that way. But if you're inside the architectural file or inside the one file, you have to, one of the clash categories has to be used on your own side. Okay? And with that said, a lot of people always ask me, well, Brian, well, where do you really start using this? And for me, it's mostly an internal check when I'm using the interference checking in Revit. You know, I have families created with 3D clearances inside of them. So all my little, you know, 60-inch round handicap clearance turning circles actually are three-dimensional. So I can go through and say, hey, here is it going to be clashing with doors? Is it going to be clashing with casework or anything like that? Start getting into, Steve Stafford blogged this a couple years ago, this thought of mine of I have handrails that match head clearances. So now I could do handrails to ceilings or handrails to beams to make sure that I'm going to have all the head clearances going in and out of my stairs. Or if you start modeling equipment, so maybe you're an MEP firm, and I know this is coming into true with a lot of MEP firms. I've got to have access to this object in the ceiling, so they're going to go ahead and model a clearance down to the ground where they're going to need for the clear floor space. Or in front of a panel, we model the clear floor space in. And it's a little bit different than just drawing rectangular lines in plan that represents that. We're going to model something 3D so we can truly use the interference checking. So with that said, those of you all know me, I'm done with PowerPoint. We'll jump right back into Revit. So the interference check, like I said, can run on just your file. So if you don't have anything linked in and you're looking at your own file, you can do the interference check. And I think one of the tools that, a lot of people don't go to the Collaborate tab and look at this whole Coordinate panel. But on the Coordinate panel, we have the copy monitor, so we can start using copy monitor. We can run coordination reviews, but the one we're talking about today is going to be the interference check. So how can I run this interference check? So there's two options when you hit the interference check drop-down. One of those options is let's show what we've already checked, and another option coming into this is let's run a new interference check. So it's kind of similar for those people in Navisworks where you can go see things that have already happened, or I can go through and run a new check to see what's going on inside of there. So with that said, we'll just kind of jump right into this and start saying, okay, let's look at the run interference check command. So once you get into the interference check, it's going to break this down into this two-column object here. So it's going to have a column on the left and a column on the right. That's basically what you're going to start running your interferences to. I'm going to compare what's on the left to something that's on the right. You're also going to see that not only can you compare from what's on the left to what's on the right, but you can get into the fact of, do I want one of these to be a linked model? So if I come in here and say, I'm going to grab this from the current project and I want to link into the structural project. But once I choose a linked file on one side, the other side then will only display current project. And that was my little nuance when you start looking at it. So if I come over here and change them both to current again, and on this side decide to choose one of my links, now the other side is only going to be current. So you have to always be checking your model. Like I said, I could open up the structure file, make sure the MEP file is linked in, and run an interference check that way, but it is going to be always native to what's in your file. I wish that would change. I've been wishing that would change for years, but I don't think a lot of people request that, so I don't think it's something we're ever going to see. So when you start getting inside of here, the other nice thing is it doesn't display all of the Revit categories. It also doesn't necessarily look at what's going on in your visibility graphics. So I know in Revit there's a lot of things that if I go into like visibility graphics, I can come in here and say, hey, what am I looking at? What do I want to be seeing inside of here? So if I check the electrical or the architecture, it's not going to make any difference if I only have one of these checked when I get into Collaboration Manager. I do know when you get into other things like view templates, or not view templates, excuse me, view filters, etc., the disciplines can kind of come back to what you're looking at here. Interference check is not one of those things. So if I just leave this set up to show all and come back to interference check and run it, you're going to see I did not gain any more categories of what I'm going through. So what I do love about this is it only displays categories of things that are modeled. So if I don't have any casework modeled, it's not going to display casework. If I don't have furniture modeled, it's not going to display furniture. It's kind of one of those nice things is it does pick up on what's being used in that model. So and when I get inside of here, if I switch over here to say, hey, I'm going to go into the structure model, again, you're going to see in that structural model, this is all that's been modeled. So it's not picking up on doors in the structure model. There aren't any. However, if there would be, it'd be showing doors over there. Again, if I switch to the MEP model, then you're going to start seeing this is what's been modeled in the MEP. So one of my little tips is if you're kind of just curious of what may or may not exist in a linked model, this is a quick thing to come in and see what categories are being used. It's like a nice little quick filter. Hey, here's what categories are in that model or in your own current model. Like if you're wondering, man, I tasked Joe to go through and model all the furniture systems. I wonder if they've done that. You don't have to go searching through filters or schedules or anything. You just run the interference check and say, oh, nope, there's no furniture system category. It's not being used. So kind of a little tip there that's totally off topic, but using this tool for something other than it's intended for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come inside of here and I'm going to do the typical, hey, I'm going to check my windows or possibly my doors to the structural model. And when I get into that structural model, I'm going to check it to the structural columns. You can do more than one category at a time. My personal opinion is I don't usually do that because I want to go through and be able to seamlessly see what's going on. If I do all of them, sometimes I'll get 600 warnings and I just get overwhelmed with it. But if I just come in here and start doing it one at a time, maybe it'll come in and it'll be a little bit better in the fact that, hey, I've only got 2 warnings as opposed to 200, etc. So
well, for anybody who's familiar with Navisworks, where you do a clash detection and you can see, you get all the information you get in Navisworks, you think, oh, well, why is this any different? Well, it's because of the way Revit handles the interference that it can get very confusing if you have a lot of things checked at once.
Yeah, so this is setting it up. You can also say select all categories, invert, none. I very rarely use those. I just go through and check. And like I was saying, there are some nuances. Some of the categories you get will have the subcategories displayed for them. So I don't have to run coordination to all structural framing. Maybe I just want to check the diagonal bracing. So I can go in and say, look, I'm looking for bracing as opposed to the girders, etc. Or if I'm trying to run ducts through trusses, I could go check my cords. So little different ways to get in and set up when you're doing that. But for now, I'm just going to do structural columns. And I'll say, okay. And it does come in looking at the typical kind of Revit look here of here's a list of things with their element IDs. Kind of like, what does this mean? And it does show you at the top, you're comparing Category 1 to Category 2, or Category 2 to Category 1 if you wanted to switch it. All that does is show you which one's interfering with the other one in the tree form. So what they mean by Category 1 and Category 2 is column 1 and column 2 in that directory. So for me, out of habit and kind of, OCDism, I'm a little bit structured in what I like to do. I always pick my model on the left and the linked model on the right. So for me, Category 1 would be architectural model on the left in this case, and in this case, structural model on the right. That's all it does. It doesn't really change it that much. I honestly don't really know why that's an option and where that would be really beneficial, but that's what it is. So when you can come down here and look at this, again, just like anything else in Revit, it does give you the element ID, and it also gives us the nice little show button. So if I come down here and decide I really want to see what's going on, I can hit the show button, and it's going to tell me there's no good view open for this. Well, partially because I'm in a view where the structural linked model is turned off. So just like most things in Revit, like when you're coming from a schedule, I can hit OK, and it's going to try to take me in and zoom me into where I'm going. So it may be able to be seen in this view, but the weird part is I know this clash is on the second floor view. So what I usually tell everybody before you get into this, close all of your views, go down to one like 3D view where you've got a good thought of where it's looking, and then go run your interference check. So that way when you run this, you'll be able to see the entire model as opposed to it cycling through 20, 30, 40, 50 views, just to kind of give me a thought of where it's going. Sometimes if I'm working on a project and I've got, a 6-story building, maybe it'll be a clash internally. I'll open up 3 or 4 or 5 3D views that are associated only to each level, so that way it'll take me to the view where it can see it in a little bit more easily. This is a tiny little building, so it's going to work well this way. So I'm going to go back to interference check, and again, I don't have to run the interference check. I can show the last report because I've already ran that interference check. So it's kind of nice. I don't have to keep going through and doing this. If I realize I want to close this and change something in the visibility graphics, hey, I'm clashing structure to architecture. Maybe I'll hit close in this dialog box, go into my visibility graphics, and turn off the mechanical link. So that's one thing I like about this as well, is I can constantly just change it and go back to show last report and not have to have Revit churn through all of the issues if it's a large file. So boom, just show me the last one I ran. Okay, so now that I'm in here, if I come in here and highlight this issue, I can say show, and it's going to zoom me in just like anything else and try to show it to me. See that if I pick on it, it's highlighting the different objects. I usually try to pick on the parents up here, because when you pick on the, I shouldn't say the parent, but the subparent, the one above the 2 elements anyway, when I pick on that, it highlights both of the elements. And now I can kind of see it's right down in here where I'm having the issue. So I can zoom in a little bit more. Now I can pick on the structure or the window and really see what's going on with that. So now that I know what I'm looking at, I can go ahead and say close, and I can see, hey, this is the issue that I'm having. So I've got this window running into the structural column. So either the structural column needs to move, or more than likely, I'm going to be moving my window. So I can take control of this window. I can go ahead and say, you know what, this window is going to be more than 1 3/4 inches away from that. Let's just go make it like 1.5 feet, I can visually see it's no longer a clash. So once I get that clash fixed, I can come back into the show last report, and if I click on this and say refresh, it disappears because it's no longer a clash. So if you go into the show last report, you have to hit the refresh button. It is still the way the report was, even though your model has been updated. And I think that's kind of a big one. I see people go back into this going, wait, what's going on? I'm having issues here. It's not showing the updates. It's a simple matter of hit the refresh button, which is weird because that's not Revit-esque. Most times in Revit, things are live updating, etc. This is one of the exceptions to the rules. So you can see since I went into the show last, it showed me when it was originally created, you know, right before this start. I guess actually, I ran this earlier today at 10:31 p.m. That's so not right. I was not in this file at 10:31 p.m. So I don't know what's going on with the time here because that's, you know, some weird time zone. So maybe I'm lying about that because, you know, that's in the future. I'm finding clashes before they exist, which is what this is for. Okay. So the one thing I like to show that it doesn't do.
Oh, you bought the computer with the flux capacitor.
I did. So the one thing I like to show is what it doesn't do, what Navisworks will do. Is if I come down here and kind of zoom in, I'm on that same structural column, but I'm going to kind of zoom into this at a level 1, where Navisworks blows us out of the water. Because this really isn't a feasible type of construction. I don't think I'm going to be able to mount a window right next to a structural column. But in the Revit world, this is not a clash because there isn't an interference. Objects can be touching on their surface. So, oh, he's saying it's, somebody, Bill Allen, had noticed that the time in there, it's 3 o'clock, 10 minutes, 31 seconds. So it wasn't actual time. It's in degrees and minutes. So what? Yeah. Glad you knew that one, Bill, because I was clueless. So this is not an interference in Revit. And this is where Revit is not a replacement for getting into Navisworks. This is not going to be one of those issues. It's not going to give us, hey, I can get into 6 inches, you know, of clash. So we can add that interference in there in Navisworks. We just don't have that in Revit. Revit is, if it's clashing, etc. Okay?
I think the important thing, though, is that, you know, it does give those of us in the world who have to find these things a convenient way to do it, because most people have either the plain vanilla Revit architecture or whatever, or they have the Building Design Suite Premium, which comes with only the Navisworks Simulate, which doesn't do a full-fledged you know, clash detection like Navisworks Manage does. But most people, you know, unless they really need Navisworks Manage and the ultimate building design suite, aren't going to spring for that extra $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 that the ultimate suite takes. So this is really a convenient tool to do, you know, first level checking.
Yeah, and I think that's it too. And it's not like, I always like to say, it's not a clash detection. You know, as designers, we're checking for model coordination, and that's what this is doing. You know, it's a contractor's job most of the time to check for clashes, but we're checking for model coordination. Yes, they're an extremely similar thing, but a lot of times a contractor is going to be able to tell you, hey, this isn't feasibly constructible, and that's more of a clash where they can use the Navisworks. But this is more for model coordination. So I don't like to call it the interference check tool. I like to call it the model coordination tool, just to make sure, hey, are we doing what we're doing? So I'm going to close out of this nice floor plan that I opened. Again, I'm going to go ahead and do another interference checks. You know, hey, let's go through and let's just say, you know, I'm going to try to run ceilings, and instead of my current project, I'm going to go to MEP, and I'm going to go run it to ducts. So the one thing that you do, you know, for the architects not understanding MEP discipline or their MEP categories, I shouldn't say the discipline, you know, getting inside of here, I can check ceilings to ducts, but that's not going to be the terminals that cut through it. Because if I check air terminals, every diffuser is going to be an issue. And I'm not going to put a hole, you know, you may or may not have a hole in your ceiling for every air terminal, but I do want to make sure that are there any ducts running into this. I'll hit OK. Yay! I've coordinated this well. Of course, there's only 4 ceilings in this project. It's all open structure, so probably not that difficult of a clash to go through. But when you start getting in here, you can really get in and understand that, okay, real quickly, I don't have to go cut building sections. I don't have to run through this to check. I can just start running interference checks. And like I said, if you want to, go to the MEP file, hit check all and check all. I hate that. Hit all, then the checkbox, all, then the checkbox, then hit OK, and see how many issues you're going to have. You know, for me, I'm not putting holes in my walls where the ducts go through the walls. I'm not putting holes in my ceilings for all of the air terminals. So when I start coming down and looking at, you know, my ton and ton and ton of issues here, it's kind of like, oh, there's ceilings. Okay, there's a door. That's probably a clash detection. A door to an electrical fixture, I'm guessing, is going to be a model interference scenario. But, you know, all the floors are going with duct accessories and duct fittings. So if there's a main trunk going through the building, I didn't have those in there. And this is why you can kind of see when I'm getting into there, might not be one of the greatest solutions to check everything to everything, because you're going to start looking at this going, that's way too many of these objects. You will also notice that Revit, unlike Navisworks, does not number these for us or anything. So I'm not going to get nice, pretty numbers saying I have 600 different clashes inside of here. You have a lot because you have to scroll. And you can judge how many you have by the size of your scroll bar on the right. So, but now I can come in here and really start looking at all of these saying, okay, we've got something with casework versus electrical fixtures. Oh, so I've got casework. I've got the casework double cabinet sink, and I've got an issue with an electrical receptacle for the dishwasher. Probably not a clash. There's probably an outlet in the wall where I've got my sink for the dishwasher / garbage disposal. Probably don't care about that one. And that's kind of one of the things that are nice. You can kind of look and see possibly what things are named. You can also come through here and just start eliminating some of the ones that you might have thought been an issue. This is definitely a clash. I honestly did not know this one existed in this model because I had not run doors to electrical fixtures. So I'm going to go show it. I want to see what's going on. And again, okay, let's see if we can start finding it in the model. You can still pan. You can still zoom. I'm assuming it's going to be, well, I have no idea where it's going to be. Let's keep cruising through here, and let's click on this. Okay, so I'm not seeing this. And this is the one thing that I do wish I knew. Well, it's door 103, so it's probably on the first floor. Let's highlight that again. I'm not seeing it being highlighted. There it is. So I need to come zoom in down here. Okay, this is a coordination with my MEP guy that, you know what? I've got a duplex outlet sitting right somewhere in here that's probably not going to work. So just kind of one of those nice little things. And the one thing I do love about this is I can now give my MEP guy the element ID number so they can go search for that. So being able to come in and say, oh, okay, here we go. Let me give you this element ID number. Or even better, let me go export this out. So just like everything else in Revit, we do have the export button. It does export it out as an HTML file. Sometimes I just like to export it because in my mind it's a little bit easier to read the HTML file than it is to interference. Give it a name here so I don't get confused. So I don't, you know, my mind sometimes it's a little bit easier to just close this out and then open this up with the HTML file. So however you want to look at it, see it, etc. Getting into the HTML.
Brian, when you, Mark's got a quick question here that we're getting away from a little bit, so I want to kind of loop back to it before we get too far away. But he asks, where does the term model coordination come from? Is it the industry standard now? Mm-hmm. And I think we've got a couple things we're talking about. You know, on your level, say the designer level or the maybe the engineer's level, the architect's level, etc. You know, when you're doing an kind of a coordination for yourself, like you are doing right here now, as a model coordination, you're really just looking for those things that are going to be a problem down the road, like this outlet in the doorway. You'll also hear the term in an overall BIM workflow of a coordination meeting where, let's say, all the subs and all the contractors and everybody are getting together and they've all submitted their files, and now they're doing a comprehensive coordination meeting. And, you know, then everybody's delegated with their tasks of things to fix during the design and, you know, early phase construction projects. What are your thoughts on that, Brian?
I've been using the term model coordination for a while, and I don't look at it as anything different than the old drawing coordination we used to have, right? So back in the good old days, we would always go through and go to a light table or use a PDF thing on top of each other to start seeing, what's coordinating with the models, right? We've always done drawing checks. We've always, as a design industry, tried to go through and make sure that what we were drawing wasn't going to have issues. Once we went into 3D modeling, this possibly brought it to a different level of intensity because now we've got models, and in the past where nobody cared if a light fixture went into my door, they might be caring now just simply because, hey, that's something we need to look at. Although we all know in reality, is anybody going to do something with that? Are they going to be putting that, trying to find this here, are they going to be putting that object in the outlet in the door? No, they're going to put the outlet next to the opening. But it's just one of those things to try to start coming in here and seeing, wow, is it truly working? What's going on, etc.
Well, and when you go to a coordination meeting at, a construction firm or an MEP firm where everybody's working, they become a lot more intense. So, I think what the term that Brian's using, yes, I think it's pretty much an industry standard in many regards, but it has kind of its own meaning to it. So hopefully that answers your question, Mark.
Well, I think the big thing is once I really get into this and start looking at it, that model coordination, is the fact that there's a panel, which I'm not seeing in my floor plan because my view range is probably set up wrong. But there is an entire construction panel. Yeah, I don't think a circuit panel is going to be able to be mounted there. No. And so for me getting into this, and I guess if I would have read that warning a little bit more, it probably said panel. I wasn't really paying attention to it. But it probably said it was an MEP panel as opposed to getting into just an outlet. I probably should have looked, and the MEP guys online are probably going to, that's not an outlet. Pay attention. Right? So trying to isolate this, seeing what's going on with this door really is going to let me know, oh, it's this. And not only is there a panel there, I think if I spin this model around slightly, this might be some conduit going up, and there could be conduit, etc. right there. So it's, okay, something drastically changed here. And I might not have noticed this looking at it in a floor plan view. Yeah, I can see there's some conduit here if I'm really paying attention, but whatever. So it looks to me like I moved this wall for the storage, and I've just now completely hosed MEP.
Well, shame on you.
So just being, clear with understanding that. So this is where it's great, and I love the interference check. Saves me time of going through the model and walking around and looking. I can just sometimes do it. Now, again, I'm not going to go into the show last report because I know I had a tremendous amount of warnings in there. But it is giving me a clue of what I might need to look for. So now maybe I'm going to come in here and say, hey, let's do doors. And let's grab the MEP Office. Instead of doing everything on this side, maybe we'll do everything on this side to doors. So it's starting to let me understand, oh, hey, here's that one object that we had. So it's this, I should have looked and saw it was an electrical fixture. But so here's that one object we had. So that's the only door interfering with it. Great. I love that. Let's close this out. Let's go back to the interference check. And maybe let's run doors against the entire structural model. Right? Do we have any sort of framing in there? Well, probably not structural walls because if they didn't put an opening there, but maybe you want to check that, and let's see what warnings we have. So my doors are all good.
And Charles, to answer your question, yes, this is being recorded. It will be on the CAD-1 YouTube page, and also you can find that the link to it on our website, CAD1.com. under the webinars archives. So it will be up there. Usually it takes Denny about 4 or 5 days to kind of get around to it and get it posted, but it'll be up there sooner than later.
So yeah, getting in again to the whole theory here that I'm going to go in and check all of my windows. Again, just kind of one of those quick things that, in your design experience, what do you start to notice things having issues with? We ran ceilings to ductwork. Probably another really good one to run is going to be ceilings to structural framing. So I'll come over here to my ceilings and run those to the structural model. And yeah, I'll even run them to structural walls and see what's going on. Oh, boom, now I've got some issues here. Or do I? Right? So running ceilings to the entire structural model, I probably didn't put a hole in the ceiling where I've got a structural column coming out. Might be something you want to look at, might be something you don't really care about, but just kind of understanding, oh, okay, I've got ceilings to structural columns, ooh, that's bad, but let's look at structural framing, right? And this is where the little category thing comes into play, because I know I don't want to look at the structural columns, I want to look at the structural framing. So bouncing those categories back and forth, I did say earlier, it's kind of like I don't use it a lot. I forgot this is why I do use this. Coming up here is I don't really care about ceilings. I care about the different categories I had in the structural. I'm not going to care if there's a column poking through my ceiling. That's just something that they'll frame around, etc. But I do care if there's structural framing going through my ceiling. I do care in both of these situations. So why is there structural framing going through my ceiling, right? That could be a cross brace. It could be something else. So when I look up in here, it doesn't tell me necessarily what it is. If I had a whole bunch of these, what I personally would do is go back to the interference check and run my ceilings now to structural framing. So I'm going to go structure, but I'm going to do some subcategories. I don't want all of the structural framing to be checked. First, I'm just going to run it against girders. Oops. So I'm going to go run structural framing just to the girders. Am I having girders hit my ceiling? I don't know what those, they were HSSs, so I highly doubt it. But I'll start going through and just saying, hey, what was this going to be? Maybe I'll do it against other or vertical bracing or horizontal bracing. Start getting into trying to see what this object was. So I'm just going to do the three bracings, etc. Okay, yes, it's one of my bracing families. So now I can come in here and say, okay, let's go ahead and hit show. It zooms me out, and it does try to center the object in your screen. So more than likely, something right here is going to be going on. So what I'm going to do is go into my visibility graphics, and I do love this about the dialog. I can keep the warnings up on my second monitor. My interference is up as I start going through and turning things on and off. I don't care about walls right now because I didn't tell it to check for walls. So I'm going to go turn walls off. Maybe I'm just going to come in here and turn doors off because I don't need doors or windows, maybe to try to help me isolate what's going on in that model. So I'm going to go turn walls, doors, and windows off, and now I can see, ooh, there's the diagonal brace. Well, why am I having issues with that diagonal brace and that ceiling? Well, now let's go zoom in and see. Oh, so that diagonal brace is sticking out of the wall, so I probably have more of an issue than that diagonal brace going into my ceiling. It looks like I'm having a whole diagonal brace sticking out of the wall, so I might need to further the wall out. All right, so using these tools, again, just to come through, I'll hit the show button again. It's that ceiling up there, so it's the one right above it. All right, so pretty quick, no additional tools needed, not a $10,000 Navisworks program needed. It's not as powerful as Navisworks, but just to quickly go through and start seeing some of the conditions you may have. Probably truly where I use the most of this, and I'm just going to go back to the 3D view where I'm only looking at the architectural view. Probably one of the true series and where I start to use this is I am big about adding additional things into my project. So one of the things that I love to do is I have a handrail type that's called my head clearance. So for me, I'm going to take this standard handrail and I'm just going to copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to go paste same place. And once I paste same place, I'm going to swap that guardrail out to be my handrail that's a head clearance. So, you know, now I can start going through, and I honestly do this in the preliminary aspects of my project on every single stair. I draw a stair in an SD phase of a project. I copy the handrail, I paste same place, I put my head clearance in. I go all the way around the building. Every stair I model, I get that in. Because now I not only get this visual aspect, but the other nice part about this is I can then go run an interference check in my own project. Hey, maybe I want to run it between railings and ceilings and floors. And I run a lot of this, and people think I'm crazy, but I don't know how many times I go to offices, and in that office I see that there's somebody modeled a ceiling in the stairwell. Because they were just cruising along. Somebody said, go put ceilings in there. They're clicking the ceilings in all the rooms, and nobody bothered to think about, hey, you probably don't have a ceiling in the stair. Or maybe the design changed. What was an office now becomes a stair. So I, a lot of times, do railings to ceilings to floors. I also do railings to doors, right? Because I have a railing coming into the door, and I've got my 1-foot extension. I probably don't have my, ADA clearances that I'm going to need on there. So I start running these sorts of checks. And look, I have a whole lot of issues with handrails hitting doors. So again, just some of those internal checks that a lot of times you don't even have to do anything special, set anything up. You just start coming in and saying, hey, let's run handrails to doors. Let's run, it sounds stupid, let's run stairs to floors. Let's run all of this stuff to ceilings. Different types of checks to really start getting in and seeing what you're doing.
Ryan, Josh asks if you're willing to share that rail family.
Honestly, give me towards the end of the session. It'll be quicker to show you how to create that family than it will be for me to share it and you to copy it and paste it and go through the craziness. It's a real simple family, not that big of a deal to create. Okay, so getting into things like that. So the other thing for me, and I'm just going to go to floor plan to place this so I can place it a little bit more intelligently, is I come in here, I've got my countertop modeled. I need to show the clear floor space. Well, one of those things for me is if I go into component and you start to see my clear floor space, you can kind of see it's a little bit different. It's not just a round circle and plan. It's this clear floor space, kind of looks like a cone or a wedding cake or something like that. Same thing if I go grab my, I thought it was right next to that one. Did I not get it loaded in this project? Ooh, I might have to load another one. Same thing I have true for my rectangular shape. So if I come down here and go to my folder, still in my 2014 rectangle here. Again, you can kind of see in the preview, it's not just a square, it's actually stacked up because I know I need the 4 inches of clear. I only need the 60 inches of clear at a certain height. Then at the height, it can be 4 inches off of the wall. Right, so we can come through here and start now placing these. And again, it looks like a line in plan, but I also know this can go technically underneath the sink. So if I'm trying to get that handicap turning in here, I know it can go into the door. It can go under the grab bar, etc. I can place this in here. If I go switch to be my other code, okay, did I not name it the same thing? Did I not just hit load? Okay, I'm going to go find it on the project browser because I did something wrong, obviously. Let's find it over here because I swore I just loaded it. I believe they're both generic models. Yeah, here's my rectangle. So here's all the different code clear floor space rectangles. I think I was just blind. Right, and you're going to see that not only do I have a 30 by 48, but I have a 30 by 48 front approach. And I'm just going to drop these both next to this sink here. So here's just my 30 by 48 clear floor space, and then here's going to be the one that's a front approach on it as well. And the reason I have these differently, and you'll see, is technically this clear floor space can snap underneath, right? Because as long as we've got enough clearance for the toes, the armrests, etc., we'll be able to see it. But now what's great is those are generic models. So now when I'm going to go do my interference check, I can go to my Collaborate tab, go into Interference Check, and say, I'm looking for generic models, in this case, the casework. No interference check found. But if I go back into that section view I had, and we start looking at the restroom, which is over here, here's my clear floor space. The reason I had front approach is I've got the toe kick space, the armrest space, and then the clear floor space up above that. So this is what our code is telling us for. So again, they're not just rectangular squares in plan. I'm truly using these to get underneath where they can go to snap to see if I'm getting it. I put this next to a door because I've got the little blind cane space with the 4 inches allowable coming in. So if you model hardware on the door, it's not going to be an interference. If you've got a sconce or a sign on the wall, not going to be an interference on that. So being able to use these, set these families up to have the capability of what you're looking for, getting in to do it. I thought I had an example of an MEP piece of equipment that would have the clear floor space. I unfortunately did not, but let's go look at the MEP file and see if it did. I don't know if this one did or not. It does not look like it does. So a lot of my clients now are taking these panels and putting a 3D in front of it for clear floor space as well, because it's not just enough that we have a panel there. By code, you have to leave the clear floor space open for that panel. So they're starting to get into a lot of things like that. They're also getting into like VAV boxes or anything that's in the ceiling that comes down and projects down, hey, I need this clearance for someone to be able to get into, on the floor, so you can't put furniture there. So as crazy as it sounds, sometimes I'll run duct accessories to furniture because I've got to have the clear floor space, or duct accessories to other things that we're not supposed to have inside of there.
Actually, that's really a great tool. James asked kind of a similar question to Josh. Would you be willing to share some of those families so you can either show how to build them or share them? Or
we'll see if we have time. It's really not that big of a deal. It's just doing the dashed line family you already had and picking an extrusion off of it. It's just more getting into the code scenario side of it. But yeah, we should. going pretty fast actually. I'll probably be done about 15 minutes early, so we'll definitely get into how to create those two families. So, it's in the clear floor spaces is not something I'm inventing. I mean, I think a lot of people are doing this in the industry. You go to, Revit Technology Conference or any of these other conferences, you're really starting to see more and more people talking about doing that. It just, I don't ever hear anybody follow it up. And the reason we're doing it is now in Revit, we can use the interference check. Right? Everybody's doing it for Navisworks, and so everybody can communicate, which is great. But now you've got the interference check. One of the times I used it the most is I actually worked with a manufacturer of baggage handling, box handling equipment, and they would work with a lot of architects using Revit, and one of them was for an airport, and in the baggage handling we put a clearance where all the bag space needs to be clear, and it was great because once we put it in the model we realized that the bags would have taken out all the hanging light fixtures. Because in plan, you see the baggage equipment, you're like, hey, that's great, not a big deal, but nobody thinks about, oh, gee, we have this, we've got that. So the luggage would have just been taking out all those light fixtures as they went down. So again, just another scenario of, hey, let's go through and put that clear floor space, or in this case, luggage floor space, luggage clearances in that object as well. So just start thinking about stuff like that. One of my residential clients, not only do they model the cars, they've got a big giant box outside the cars of how wide the door needs to open. So
right.
They, for the garage, we're going to show people, here's the doors, here's the clearance you need around the doors, and they kind of get into that. So as they're doing a presentation, they've got this, they don't use green like I do, but they've got this big transparent-ish colored box around all the vehicles so they can show them, well, this is kind of the clearance you need, A, to get in and out of the garage, B, for space. So here's what you're going to have, and this is why we feel we can put shelving here, et cetera, to your advantage.
I'm going to put in a plug for a product that's relatively new to the Autodesk suite, but it's called vehicle tracking, and if any of you are doing any sort of parking lots and things like that, it is an excellent tool for laying out that type of thing. So we'd be happy to show it to you. We've actually got a couple webinars that we did on that, and you can check them out on our YouTube page as well.
All right, so not that big of a deal. It's just this was more of a to open everybody's eyes up to this tool. I hear a lot of people say, oh, that tool's terrible, I never use it. I just don't understand that. Yes, if I have a choice between this and Navisworks, for me, 80–90% of the time I'm doing Navisworks because Navisworks is my second passion behind Revit, software-related wise. So I really love Navisworks and what I'm capable in that. But for me, it's, hey, if I'm just quick in the model, I don't want to have to go open this in Navisworks and do this. I start running some quick interference checks. And it's funny, I do a lot of this with my clients. I go to their office, and I see something like, oh, gee, the handrail's hitting a door. So I just come in and do this and see 30 issues of handrails hitting doors. It's like, hey, did you guys really get into this and look, or are you just kind of going to town? And granted, if it's really early in the design, who cares? But it's also one of those things where now you can flag people of, oh, hey, by the way, really look at this as the design, gets more on point. Okay? So with that, I don't think there's a whole lot of questions that came up. Tips I have: create clearances in your families. Go to a view where it's going to be easier to see when you do it, although unlike the warnings dialog box, you can still pan, zoom, orbit, do all the tools natively without using the steering wheel. Go to visibility graphics, change all of those scenarios. So it's really nice on the interference check. I wish warnings would give us the same thing. It's really nice on that interference check on what you can get inside of there. And then the only other tip is if you are the architect or you are somebody else and you want to check the two other disciplines, feel free to open up, one of the models, link the other one in, and then just run your interference check. Because I do know there are some ducts in this file running into structural, but I can't check that inside the architectural model. So that's where Navisworks will really come to play. So just think about that. As for thoughts on the interference check tool, the question came up, will you share the handrail family? This handrail family is one of the easiest families I think there is to create. The first thing on this is if you just go down to profiles, you more than likely already have the handrail rectangular profile family. It's probably already loaded in. It's loaded in the out-of-box template. You might have removed it. This is an out-of-the-box family. All I do is I grab one of the profiles, I duplicate it, and I give it a name. So I'm just taking that profile. That's a rectangle. I think on Steve Stafford's blog, when he blogged this before I was blogging, he made a profile of a person. So you can see a little person walking down the stairs. I just use the rectangle. I don't go that advanced. Then in the head clearance family, I'm just going to make the height 5'8". I know head clearance is 6'8", but as it goes up and down and around things, I don't really need to know that I have the clearance at the toes. I need to know I have the clearance at the head space. And then I usually just make this 3 feet wide. So I make it 5'8" tall, 3 foot wide. That's all I do. And then if I go into my handrails, I go to my railings, and I'm going to come down here and grab one of my handrail types, not types, excuse me, one of my railing types. Take any railing type. It does not matter. I'll grab guardrail pipe because that's an out-of-the-box family. I'm going to go edit the type properties. I'm going to go into the baluster placement, and I'm going to say none to all of the balusters. So balusters, start, corner, and end post. So I've got nothing in the baluster families coming in, so no vertical segments. And then in the rail structure, all I need is a single line, so I'm going to delete out any line that may be in here. I like to name these, so I'm going to call it head, without the caps locks, head clearance. And here's where I'm going to say start at 6'8". My offset is going to be half of the width of it, so since I make it 36 inches, I'm going to make it offset 18. I'm going to choose the profile I created. I also like to give it a material that's transparent in shade mode. So for me, you can go create a clearance material if you want to. I usually do. But since I'm not getting into that, I'm going to grab default roof. Default roof, I think out of the box, or default exterior wall, or one of those, is green and transparent. This is a file that was created like in Revit 2010 and upgraded. So I'll say OK. I'll say OK. I'll say OK. There is that family you wanted me to share. I duplicated a profile, made it 5'8", duplicated a handrail. I didn't duplicate the handrail. I edited a handrail. Oops. Should have duplicated the handrail. Removed all balusters. Removed all rail structures except for one. Used the new profile. Gave it a height of 6'8". That's it. Now if I go find a stair somewhere in my model, and go to my 3D section view, click on a stair I haven't, I've already done it to both stairs. So you can see I've already done it to this stair, but what I would normally do is take a handrail that's there, copy it to the clipboard, paste same place, and change it out to be my new handrail. Oh, that's why. I didn't already have one here. I just forgot to rename it. Now I've got the head clearance to be able to go through and see what's going on. So that's the simplest of that one. As for the clear floor space family, it's really not that big of a deal. I said I'd show you guys that one too. So if I just go grab the clear floor space family, it's a generic model. I'll grab the rectangular one. So the one thing that I do in these generic model families, you're going to see I have a length, and this one's specifically for one of my clients. You're going to see the client's acronym in front of it. I'm going to do a length. I'm going to do a width. I do have one set to the left and to the right. And then I have two other reference planes for toe clearance and then the front clearance. So if I come here and swap this out to be one of the front approach ones and hit OK, you're going to see that I've got the toe clearance and the front clearance. And then my side clearances are always 4 inches. My back clearance is always 4 inches. And then I did a left and a right in case I needed to offset it. And then that's really it. In the elevation, I created, sorry, that should have been the front, not the right. I created a 9-inch tall, a 27, and an 80. Didn't even parameterize those because there is no parameters. That's what code tells us it has to be. We have to be clear at 9 inches for cane detection and for footrests. Then at 27 inches, that's our armrests, and then 80 inches tall for those tall people don't hit their heads. Then all I did was create one extrusion from the ground up to here of the outside rectangle, another extrusion, and a third extrusion. Really all I did. And then if we go back and look at this in 3D, what I did was selected those 3 extrusions, and I created a material and a subcategory. So I've got a material parameter in case you want to change it, and I also went in and added a object style of clear floor space so I can make the lines dashed. Wasn't that terrible of a deal. It was pretty easy way to go through and do
And
that.
like we say, this webinar is being recorded, not reported, and it will be posted in the next few days. So, you know, you can go back through to the YouTube, click over towards about the 45-minute mark, and then pick up Brian's tips here. Mark M. had a question, is there a way to model a clearance around a pipe in kind of a similar fashion?
You can't, unfortunately, model a clearance around a pipe. What you can do, and what I personally do, there's two things I do, especially if I'm in a multidisciplinary office where MEP and architecture are in the same model, not a linked model. What's really cool is you can actually go in and model a connector. I do it with ductwork, I do it with pipe, and in that connector I also can nest in a void, so then that void can automatically cut the wall. So at every wall, or at least any wall where I want to do it, I can put in this connector right at the wall and then cut the wall, and that also void that cuts the wall could be used for clearance or interference checking as well. So unfortunately with pipes, I don't know of a way. There could be a way out there and it could be incorrect. But what you can do is on connectors you can do. So I usually just put like a connector at the walls, and then I use the cuts with voids tool to cut it out through the wall, and I can go through and bust out all the openings in the wall. Again, that's only if you're in the same discipline. So if you're, like most practices, mechanical, electrical, plumbing is in a separate model than the architect, then that theory doesn't work for cutting, but it would still work for having those into the connectors.
And then if you're in Navisworks, you can do a hard or a soft collision, and you can add some room for insulation or various factors like that. But you do have to be in Navisworks to kind of.
Yeah, the same question kind of comes up too, is like, what if all my steel is fireproofed? I want to show like 3 inches around the steel.
Yep.
Really not going to do that. Is it possible? It is possible for the steel, but it's just not probable or worth it in my mind. But you could do that if you really, really wanted to.
Yep. So, Josh, James, and Mark, hope that answers your questions. Does anybody else have any other questions real quick? I'm going to go through a couple things coming up, and we like to keep bringing this up. First off, Brian, as always, thank you for preparing this webinar, and you can get a hold of Brian Mackey's blog as well as him for various services that he has available. bdmackeyconsulting.com, and you can also check out the CAD-1 website for classes that we have coming up and so forth. One of the big things that we're facing this year, and I want to remind everybody of, is that as of the end of January next year, Autodesk will no longer be upgrading any software other than the current at all. So if you do have older software sitting around and you think, gee, we're going to need to use that, I mean, this is expensive stuff. We're going to need to use that in the future. Make sure that we get, we or whoever your dealer you're working with, wherever in the world you are, we've got people from all over here, get you upgraded and get that taken care of so you don't lose the value of that software.
Well, and think about it in the sense of $1. I was working with one of my clients, and they upgraded they reintroduced because they had let some subscriptions lapse. They brought back up 5 subscriptions because the way they realized is if I'm going to need 2 seats of software within the next 2 years, it is cheaper to bring those back up to subscription than to purchase 2 new seats of software. So if you think you're going to grow in 2 years, yes, it's a gamble, but it's a good gamble. It's, you know, it's like betting on the stock market. Upgrade those licenses and you will be saving money. Now, if you don't, you know, expand or you go out of business, obviously it was a bad decision. But think about it in the dollars and cents ways, not just the scenario. Hey, if I buy a new seat, it costs me X. To upgrade this, it costs me this. That means upgrading the seat and keeping the seat on subscription for 2 years is the cost of 1 license. So to keep that seat inactive but on subscription for 2 years will be cheaper than buying a new seat in 2.
Yeah, and we're not trying to hardcore sell you. We just hate to see our customers, you know, get dinged by these changes and then, you know, end up having to pay a lot more money than they thought they might in a year or two when they did want to upgrade. We just don't want to see that happen to you, so keep that in mind. And other than that, Brian, have you got anything else you wanted to talk about right now?
I don't. I just appreciate everybody spending their time, and hopefully we'll start seeing more people use the interference tool inside of Revit. And we appreciate it. And again, this will be recorded, and if you guys want to find it later, it's at CAD-1 Presents on YouTube. and all of the webcast CAD-1 does is placed there.
And the last note, for those in Denver, and I don't know if you're broadcasting those still or not, Brian and the group down there, but the Rhombus meeting, the BIM users group Rhombus meeting is next Tuesday, the 15th. It is at R&L Architects this time, and CAD-1 is the sponsor this month of the dinner and snacks, and it will be a presentation, kind of a joint group presentation by the various members who went to the RTC this year, and kind of what they thought was their best takeaway. So,
well, and the other thing, that's not what I wanted. I did want to throw a shout out to, there is another user group that started up in Boulder.
Oh, that's right.
So I'm trying to find it here, but I got to log in.
It is the Boulder Building Group or something along those lines.
I don't know why this is not remembering my password. Meetup usually does. So if I come into my groups, where are my groups? Yeah, so it's the Bob Tech. So you guys are in the Boulder area in Colorado. There is Bob Tech. I think they met just Tuesday this week.
Yep.
But so if you are interested in that, you're in the Boulder area and you don't want to drive to Denver, there is also a new user group up in Boulder, which has Tobias participating quite well from Autodesk. Bill Allen, also from Oz, is pretty much heading that up. So.
Yep, and thank you, Bill. I see you on the webinar here today, so thank you for doing that. That's a great service to the community. And folks, I guess that's all we have today. Look for the webinar to be posted in a few days, and we'll see you again next month. So thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.